Hi, welcome back to the series, everyone. So, one of the coolest things you teach is that symptoms aren't random. Can you explain the idea of inflammation patterns?
Yeah, they're not random. They seem random because take, for example, a food issue, right? So there's a lot of different types of food-driven inflammation, right? Food allergies, food sensitivities, reactions to things like lectins, which we get into in our course, but they're not random, but they don't always seem linear. So, for example, somebody gets exposed to gluten. It might take 2 hours, it might take 2 days for that person to start to get symptomatic. Or another classic one we see is somebody might send a message or say, like, all my symptoms got worse over the weekend. And when you dive into it, you realize that they have a virus that reactivated their entire system. So they don't always necessarily make sense or they seem random, but they're not random. You just have to investigate what are the triggers for that individual.
So, what would you say are some of the most common inflammation patterns?
The virus one is a very common one,
Hmm.
or bacteria for that matter too. Very common for somebody to have multiple infections going on at the same time. That one's common. But some of the ones that will affect every single Hashi patient is going to be foods. They're all going to have issues with some sort of foods. Obviously, gluten being the most common, but not exclusively.
So, you mentioned gluten, it's a hot word. Do you recommend to every Hashimoto's patient not eat gluten?
If you just strictly follow the literature, it doesn't make sense that a Hashimoto's patient would ever expose themselves to gluten because the likelihood of that being a trigger for them is extremely high. It also is pretty common for a Hashimoto's patient to have what we call multiple autoimmune syndromes,
Hmm.
meaning you can have Hashimoto's, and this is how I always think through it in this case, is what other autoimmune do they have? And obviously, one of the other common ones that is missed all the time because the testing is inadequate is actual celiac disease. Very common.
And why is that missed?
Why is it missed? Because this one is purely because the testing is inadequate, right? So you can run the gene,
Hmm.
right? But that's not a smoking gun because only about 40% of people with the celiac gene actually express celiac.
Hmm.
A lot of times a regular lab will run tissue transglutaminase, but they don't run all of them. There's all these different isomers that are often missed, 23 of them. And maybe you get tested for one or two of them. That's why it gets missed. And it's so inappropriate for those people because they have false insecurity
Yeah.
saying, I don't have an issue with gluten
So they get tested and they say, and it's only one or two, and they say, "Oh, I can eat gluten."
all the time.